We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks. So this statement has just come in from Buckingham Palace, and I'll read it for you. It goes on to say, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and...
King Charles had faced family rebellion, public scandal, and private betrayal before, but nothing prepared him for the request placed directly before him that morning. Meghan had formally attempted to claim control of Diana's forbidden royal foundation, a protected institution. The late princess had never intended to become anyone's personal platform. When Charles read the final line, his expression changed. He did not speak. He simply lowered the paper and stared across the room in stunned silence. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure you subscribe to Royal Zone so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew the file carried more than just a legal demand. Diana's forbidden royal foundation was a sealed humanitarian institution, meaning it had been closed to new leadership while its name, money, archives, and identity remained protected. It had supported vulnerable children, conflict survivors, and families harmed by landmines. After Diana's death, the king refused to hand it over to another royal figure. He believed the work belonged to her memory, not to whoever stood closest to the crown. The aide continued speaking, but Charles barely moved. Meghan had submitted a formal claim to become the foundation's sole global chair, principal royal representative, and public guardian of Diana's humanitarian legacy. She had not asked for a ceremonial role. She had asked for control. Worse, an international relaunch plan already existed, complete with donors, campaign partners, and an identity built entirely around her leadership. Charles pushed his chair back and fixed the aide with a look that silenced the room. He asked who had given Meghan permission to use Diana's name. No one answered. The king set the application down, because anger would have been easier than the shock pressing against him. William arrived minutes later and read the request without saying a word. The prince understood immediately why this mattered so deeply to him. The foundation was not an abandoned charity waiting to be brought back to life. It was part of his mother's unfinished life. Meghan's demand felt like an attempt to take ownership of that pain and attach it permanently to someone outside the monarchy. Then William reached the final page. Meghan's representatives had cited a forgotten clause in the royal charter, the document defining how the institution could legally operate. That clause suggested that a woman connected to Diana's family mission could revive the foundation if the crown had left it inactive. Charles ordered the file sealed and called in his legal advisors. Yet one question remained more dangerous than the claim itself. Meghan could not have found that buried clause on her own. Someone inside the deepest royal archives had opened the door for her, and Diana's name was about to force every wounded figure into the same room. This was never only about a foundation. For Meghan, it represented recognition, influence, and a permanent connection to the most beloved woman in modern royal history. For William, it felt like an invasion of something sacred. For Charles, it reopened a chapter filled with guilt, grief, and memories he had spent decades trying to control. Diana was gone, yet her name had returned with enough force to divide the living all over again. Meghan saw more than an old charity in the sealed institution. She saw a bridge between her own painful experience and Diana's struggle against pressure, isolation, and a palace culture that demanded silence. The protected foundation remained one of the last untouched parts of the late princess's legacy, closed to new leadership so its name could not be reshaped for personal power. That protection mattered because whoever controlled it would gain moral authority, international influence, and a direct place beside Diana's memory. Meghan sat beside Prince Harry in their private home and explained why the opportunity could not be ignored. She believed the foundation would give their global campaigns a permanent royal anchor and prove that her work had always carried deeper purpose. Harry listened without interrupting, yet his unease grew. He understood her ambition, but he also knew that challenging his brother over their mother would reopen wounds neither man had ever truly healed. Harry finally asked whether William had been warned. Meghan answered that asking permission would only give the palace time to block her. The response unsettled him. He supported reviving Diana's work, but the claim had begun to sound less like a shared mission and more like a private battle for ownership. William stood beside Charles at Windsor and read the application twice. The prince chose each word carefully, but his hands tightened around the folder when he reached the sentence describing Meghan as the natural modern successor to Diana's humanitarian voice. The king watched his son's expression harden and understood that this was no ordinary institutional disagreement. For William, protecting the foundation meant defending one part of his mother that had never been sold, branded, or pulled into family warfare. Then the deeper shock emerged. Harry's name did not appear as the principal claimant. Meghan had requested individual authority, meaning the revived institution would be tied mainly to her identity rather than jointly to Diana's younger son. Charles soon learned that donors in New York had already been part of private discussions about a launch. A new logo, an international advisory board, and a public announcement were being prepared before the Crown had even responded. William closed the application, placed it carefully on the king's desk, and said Diana's legacy would not be awarded to whoever made the boldest demand. He insisted on confronting Meghan directly. Charles warned him that one uncontrolled exchange could turn private pain into a worldwide royal crisis. Yet the claim had not appeared suddenly. Its path began months earlier, during one quiet ceremony, where a forbidden promise changed everything. Months before the application reached Charles, a small memorial gathering took place behind closed doors at Kensington Palace. There were no cameras, no public speeches, and no warning that the evening would become the point of no return. Meghan stood before a portrait of Diana, while a former foundation trustee described the work that had been abandoned after her death. What happened next sounded harmless to those nearby. In reality, one quiet promise had already set the entire conflict in motion. Harry watched the room grow still as the elderly trustee spoke about the anniversary of Diana's humanitarian work. Former charity representatives and a small group of palace officials listened as he explained why the foundation had remained frozen. A trustee was someone legally responsible for protecting an organization's purpose, and those guardians had feared that choosing a successor would turn Diana's name into a political weapon. They believed silence was safer than allowing one person to reshape her identity. Meghan heard something different. She heard that valuable work had been buried because the palace feared conflict. The foundation had once supported families harmed by war and landmines. Leaving it inactive meant the people Diana cared about had lost a powerful source of help. Preserving her name had protected the monarchy from controversy, but it had also stopped her mission from moving forward. Meghan waited until the formal remarks ended, then approached the trustee beneath Diana's portrait. She lowered her voice and said, "Her work should not remain buried simply because the palace is afraid of who might carry it forward." The older man studied her for several seconds. Her confidence moved him, but it also opened a door neither of them fully understood. Harry overheard the final words and felt immediate unease. Later, he asked Meghan not to pursue the foundation without speaking to William first. He knew his brother saw Diana's legacy as something sacred, not a platform to be claimed. She answered that asking permission would allow the palace to close the door before she could even reach it. The trustee had already revealed something dangerous through a private recorded conversation made for the memorial archive. The foundation's charter contained an emergency revival clause, a rule allowing the institution to return if its original mission had been abandoned. He believed the clause was symbolic. Meghan understood that it could become power. Days later, someone requested archived copies under the description of historical charity research. A serving palace official approved access without warning Charles or William. Harry found Meghan that night, writing the foundation's name across a yellow legal pad. When he asked what she was doing, she covered the page and answered, finishing something they were too frightened to finish. By the time Charles learned of that promise, it had become a formal demand, and William was already preparing for the confrontation the king had feared. The meeting began with royal politeness, and ended with a silence more brutal than any shouting. William entered determined to protect his mother's name. Meghan arrived convinced that the palace was preparing to deny her before even hearing her argument. Charles had asked for calm, but Diana's memory sat between them like a third presence in the room. Within minutes, old grievances surfaced. Harry was pulled into the conflict, and the true meaning of the foundation became impossible for either side to hide. William closed the sitting room door and made one condition clear. No advisors, lawyers, or communications staff would enter. Harry waited nearby, angry at being excluded, but aware that his presence could turn the discussion into a battle between brothers. The prince began by asking whether Meghan understood why the foundation had been sealed. Its charter, the legal document controlling how the institution could operate, had been written to stop anyone from using Diana's reputation as inherited authority. Meghan did not hesitate. She said she was not stealing Diana's legacy. She was rescuing it. The foundation had remained silent while families still suffered. Yet William continued invoking his mother's name through causes approved by the palace. To her, that was not protection. It was control dressed up as respect. William felt his restraint begin to break. He told Meghan that the institution had been frozen because Diana's memory attracted power, money, and people eager to present themselves as her natural successor. When she described herself as the person most capable of continuing Diana's fight against the palace system, the future king's voice hardened. Shared suffering, he said, did not create ownership. Meghan opened the folder she had carried into the room and revealed a legally certified copy of the Emergency Revival Clause. She explained that certification meant an independent legal authority had confirmed the copy as genuine. 2 surviving trustees had also signed written statements supporting the foundation's return under independent leadership. Her argument was no longer based only on emotion. It had structure, signatures, and legal weight. William then learned the full scale of her plan. The crown would receive historical recognition, but direct palace control would end. Meghan would oversee the foundation's public message, global partnerships, and international fundraising. Diana's name would remain royal in origin, yet the institution itself would move beyond the monarchy's command. William leaned forward and asked whether she would withdraw the claim voluntarily. Meghan held his gaze and answered, "No, not when I believe Diana would have wanted the work to live." The prince ended the meeting and went straight to Charles. The king listened in silence before delivering the blow William had not expected. The claim could not be rejected with a simple royal order. The revival clause carried genuine legal force. The emotional battle had finally erupted, but the decisive struggle would unfold somewhere colder, inside the legal machinery that determined whether Diana's memory could become a weapon. Charles held the title of king, but even a monarch could not erase words written into a binding royal charter. As legal advisors gathered around the long table, family anger gave way to a serious constitutional danger. The forgotten clause was real. Meghan's claim was aggressive, but it was not empty. For the first time, Charles understood that rejecting her outright could create the very public battle the palace was desperate to prevent. The royal solicitor opened the file and explained the emergency clause, a legal rule allowing the foundation to return if 3 conditions were met. Public need had to continue. Surviving trustees had to support revival. The proposed leader also had to show a clear connection to Diana's humanitarian purpose. Meghan's legal team argued that her charity work, her marriage to Harry, and her public identification with Diana's struggles all satisfied that final condition. Charles listened without interruption, as the solicitor warned that a direct royal veto could be challenged as personal retaliation. The king removed his glasses and pressed his fingers against his forehead. Diana had created those protections to stop the crown from controlling her legacy after her death. Now those same protections had trapped her family inside a conflict no royal command could easily end. Camilla urged him to act before Meghan transformed the foundation into a global stage. The queen consort believed sovereign authority, meaning the monarch's power to make formal decisions on behalf of the crown, should be used immediately. She warned that delay would make the palace appear weak. Charles resisted. He knew a harsh intervention could be presented as another powerful institution silencing a woman who had invoked Diana's suffering. William remained outside the legal chamber, waiting for an answer that would protect his mother's name. The prince believed any revival under Meghan's command would turn private grief into public branding. Yet the longer the meeting continued, the clearer it became that keeping the foundation frozen forever was no longer possible. Then the legal team found the restriction that changed everything. Beneath the revival clause, another rule stated that no successor could claim personal ownership, hereditary control, or exclusive identification with Diana. Meghan could help bring the institution back, but her request to become sole global chair violated the charter's protection against individual possession. Charles finally saw the narrow path ahead. The foundation would return, but Meghan would not control it. An independent board would lead it, while royal figures could support the mission without owning Diana's name. The compromise would satisfy the law, but it would anger everyone. When the advisors left, Charles remained alone at the table. He touched Diana's signature on the charter and whispered that even after all these years, she had found a way to overrule them all. The king now held a lawful answer, but announcing it would unleash consequences far beyond the foundation, and Harry would feel the first blow. Harry had supported Meghan's belief that Diana's work deserved new life. What he had not understood was how completely the campaign had moved beyond him. When Charles sent the proposed settlement, the truth became impossible to avoid. Meghan could participate, but she could never possess the foundation. Harry could serve beside William, yet only under a structure designed to prevent either brother from claiming their mother. The decision offered peace on paper, but inside the family, it felt like another devastating separation. Harry read the settlement beside a cold fireplace, while Meghan waited for his reaction. Charles had proposed restoring the foundation under an independent board, a group of outside experts who would control its work without answering directly to one royal figure. William and his brother would become honorary guardians, meaning they could support Diana's mission publicly, but would hold no personal authority over its money, message, or future. Meghan could serve as a humanitarian ambassador, but she would receive no exclusive control. Meghan heard rejection hidden inside every carefully worded sentence. She told Harry that the palace wanted her face, her reach, and her ability to attract international attention, but feared giving her real leadership. To her, the offer repeated the same pattern that had driven them away: praise when she followed instructions, resistance when she demanded power. Harry kept reading until he reached the page naming him an honorary guardian beside William. His disappointment deepened. Meghan had submitted the original claim without explaining its full scope, and now his connection to Diana seemed secondary inside a campaign built around his mother's legacy. He folded the settlement once, placed it on the table, and said, "You should have trusted me before using my mother to fight them." Meghan did not retreat. She revealed through a private recorded conversation between them that she had excluded Harry as principal claimant because royal restrictions attached to his birth could have allowed the crown to take control immediately. She believed placing herself at the center was the only way to stop the palace from swallowing the foundation again. Harry understood the logic, but the explanation did not remove the pain. She had made a decision about Diana while treating her younger son as a legal weakness. The mission promised healing to strangers, yet inside their home, it had created a wound neither could hide. Then Harry found the drafted invitations. Donor discussions in New York had continued even after Charles ordered the file sealed. A foundation announcement had already been prepared, complete with dates, guest names, and Meghan's leadership title. Harry felt used by her strategy and trapped by the palace response. He contacted William and asked for a private meeting without Charles, advisors, or either wife present. For the first time, the battle moved away from legal clauses and public power, leaving two brothers alone with the grief they had spent years turning against each other. There were no secretaries taking notes, no lawyers waiting outside, and no father deciding which words were safe. William and Harry met alone in the small chapel room, where both had once attended private memorial prayers for Diana. At first, neither brother spoke. Their anger had grown so large that silence felt easier. But when Harry finally admitted that Meghan's claim had frightened him too, the conflict changed. For one brief moment, they were not rival princes. They were Diana's sons again. Harry asked William to separate his judgment of Meghan from the larger question of whether their mother's humanitarian work deserved to return. The foundation had been frozen to protect Diana's name, but that protection had also silenced causes she once fought for. William agreed that the mission should not remain buried forever. He simply refused to let one person become the official owner of her voice. William then admitted what had truly frightened him. Meghan was only part of the danger. The prince feared anyone turning Diana into a simple symbol of rebellion, compassion, or personal suffering. She had been their mother, complicated and deeply human. Reducing her life to a message serving modern ambition would erase the parts of her that did not fit. Harry listened, then admitted through their private recorded conversation that he had spent years believing he alone understood how trapped Diana had felt. When Meghan described similar isolation, he became fiercely protective. That loyalty stopped him from noticing when shared pain was being transformed into authority over his mother's legacy. William felt the truth cut both ways. He admitted that he had used control as protection, by sealing the foundation, refusing debate, and treating every challenge as a threat. The future king had created the empty space Meghan entered. His silence had protected Diana's name, but it had not protected her work. The brothers finally agreed to support Charles's independent board solution. An independent board meant outside specialists would control the institution instead of one royal household. They insisted that survivors, humanitarian experts, and former field workers should hold real power, while royal names remained secondary. Harry offered to tell Meghan himself that her claim would not proceed. William promised she would not be publicly humiliated or erased from the revived mission. Neither brother called the agreement forgiveness, but both understood it as the first honest choice they had made together in years. Before leaving, Harry placed his hand on the back of the empty chair between them and said he was tired of speaking about Diana as though winning an argument could bring her back. William looked down and quietly answered, "So am I." Their fragile understanding gave Charles the unity he needed, but the decision had already leaked, and beyond the palace walls, Diana's name was igniting a public storm. By sunrise, the dispute was no longer hidden inside royal rooms. Diana's face returned to front pages across Britain. While broadcasters debated whether Meghan had tried to take a sacred legacy or force the monarchy to revive work it had neglected, crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace, carrying flowers, handwritten messages, and photographs from Diana's humanitarian campaigns. The family had spent days arguing over control. The public was asking a much simpler question. Why had her foundation been allowed to disappear at all? Meghan watched the coverage and saw herself described in two completely opposite ways. Some commentators called her brave for exposing years of silence. Others accused her of trying to turn Diana's name into personal power. The foundation had once carried real humanitarian force, and its long closure mattered because vulnerable families had lost support, while the palace protected itself from conflict. That gap gave her argument strength, even as her demand for sole control damaged it. Charles followed the broadcasts with growing unease. Palace communications officials prepared a formal announcement confirming independent leadership, meaning outside experts rather than one royal household would control the institution. The king understood why that mattered. It preserved Diana's mission while preventing Meghan, William, Harry, or the crown from claiming ownership. Meghan felt betrayed by the wording. She told Harry during a recorded private conversation that the palace was presenting the settlement as a royal rescue, not as a response to the pressure she had created. He reminded her that the mission was returning, but she could not ignore how quickly her role had been reduced once the institution became valuable again. Charles felt another wound opening. Broadcasters compared Diana's treatment with Meghan's departure, and the monarch knew those comparisons could reshape public memory. He told his communications secretary that the crown would not survive another generation by treating every emotional challenge as an enemy attack. The admission was private, but its meaning was clear. The palace had protected tradition at the cost of trust before. Then a national broadcaster revealed the settlement before the official announcement. Meghan would not become sole chair, but she would be invited to support selected international campaigns. The leak ended any hope of controlling the story. The London Chronicle delivered the defining public verdict. Its front page showed Diana visiting a landmine field beneath the headline, "Her name belongs to the mission, not the monarchy, not Meghan." Outside Kensington Palace, a young woman placed a handwritten card among hundreds of white flowers. It read, "Do not fight over her name. Finish what she started." That message reached Charles before his final address. At last, the king understood how to end the struggle without declaring a winner or a loser. Charles entered the final meeting carrying no anger and offering no pretense that the family had escaped unharmed. Meghan's claim had crossed a line, but it had also exposed a failure the monarchy could no longer defend. Diana's foundation had been protected so fiercely that its work had been allowed to completely disappear. The king's verdict would deny Meghan the personal authority she demanded, limit royal control, reunite the brothers around a shared purpose, and permanently establish one principle. Diana's legacy would belong to the people she served. Charles formally rejected Meghan's application to become sole global chair, because exclusive control violated the foundation's original charter. That charter was the legal document defining who could lead the institution and how its mission had to be protected. At the same time, the monarch ordered the Diana Humanitarian Foundation restored under an independent board of specialists, former trustees, aid workers, and representatives from the communities it would serve. The mission would return, but no royal figure would own it. Meghan received the decision privately before the public announcement. She felt anger first, then disappointment. Her claim had failed, and the leadership role she wanted had been denied. Yet she also understood something she could not dismiss. Without her challenge, the foundation might have remained silent forever. She had lost control, but the cause she forced back into the open would finally live again. Harry spoke to Meghan through a private recorded conversation that remained within the family. He told her that forcing the issue had created something valuable, but trying to possess his mother's legacy had nearly destroyed what remained between them. She listened without defending every choice. For once, she accepted the difference between reviving Diana's work and claiming Diana's authority. William and Harry agreed to serve as equal honorary guardians, meaning their names would support the foundation without giving either brother power over its money, message, or daily decisions. The prince accepted that protection could no longer mean silence. His younger brother accepted that grief could not become ownership. Charles then addressed the nation through a recorded royal statement. He admitted that the monarchy had confused protection with paralysis. Preserving Diana's memory, he said, meant continuing her work, rather than locking it away from the people who still needed it. After the final decision was signed, Charles passed Diana's original charter toward William and Harry. Neither brother took it. William placed it at the center of the table, while Harry rested his hand beside it for a moment, before stepping back. The document remained between them, belonging to neither. The crisis ended with Meghan's exclusive claim denied, the palace official who opened the archives removed from their position, and the independent foundation approved by everyone present. Meghan had mistaken emotional connection for entitlement. William had mistaken control for protection. Harry had mistaken shared pain for unquestioned loyalty. Charles had mistaken silence for stability. Diana's forbidden royal foundation was forbidden no longer. It returned without a royal owner, without a personal successor, and without becoming the possession of the loudest voice in the room. Meghan did not win it. Charles did not reclaim it. William did not keep it frozen. Diana's original purpose defeated every personal ambition surrounding her name. The claim was closed, the foundation was restored, and Diana's legacy finally stood beyond the reach of royal possession. Thanks for watching Royal Zone. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to Royal Zone so you never miss an update, and we will see you in the next one.